Uh, hey, Virgo, there's performance happening, and you're watching it like it's genuine. They're telling you things to your face, compliments, affection, reliability, presence, while simultaneously doing something completely different when you're not in room. And the gap between what they claim and what they actually do is wide enough that if you paid attention to actions instead of words, you'd understand immediately that their public declaration of caring about you is contradicted by private behavior that suggests your liability rather than asset. Virgo, you're too smart not to have noticed this. You've probably logged it somewhere in that analytical mind of yours. Cataloged the inconsistencies, noticed the way their behavior shifts depending on who's watching, observed that they're a different person with you alone than they are when other people might find out about you. You haven't said anything because you're conflict avoidant and you're hoping maybe you're reading it wrong, maybe it's not what it looks like, maybe they actually do care and you're just paranoid. You're not paranoid, you're observant. And what you're observing is someone performing affection to your face while being ashamed of you behind your back, which is particularly cruel form of rejection because it's being wrapped in language of closeness while the actual behavior communicates distance. Let me be direct about what's happening here. This person wants what you provide: your attention, your time, your energy, your reliability, your willingness to show up and be consistent. And in private moments when it's just you, they're perfectly happy to accept all of that. But the moment other people enter picture, the moment there's any possibility that their connection to you becomes visible to people they care about, something in them shifts and suddenly you become something they need to hide or minimize or reframe. They're not saying this out loud. They're not explicitly telling you, I like you, but I'm embarrassed of you. Because if they said that directly, you'd leave, and they need you too much to risk losing you. So instead, they're operating on two frequencies: one where you feel included and valued when you're alone together, and one where you're conveniently forgotten or downplayed or mentioned with qualifications when other people are around. The embarrassment is real and it's specific. It's not about you being flawed. It's about them being insecure about how you reflect on them, about how association with you affects their image. They're concerned what other people will think. They're worried you don't fit their narrative about who they are. They're managing impression rather than managing relationship. Here's what the pattern actually looks like when you're paying attention. In private with you, they're warm, they initiate contact, they make plans, they seem genuinely interested in your thoughts and your day. And if you only had this data, you'd think the relationship is solid, that they value you, that you matter to them. But then they're with other people, and suddenly you're either not mentioned at all or mentioned so casually it's like your acquaintance rather than someone they actually spend meaningful time with. And if you're brought up, there's often apologetic tone, like they're embarrassed to have to explain relationship with you. They don't introduce you to people they care about. Or they introduce you with caveat, this is my friend who, followed by qualifier that explains why you're in their life, instead of just introducing you as someone who matters. They act like they need to justify your presence rather than just presenting you as fact of their world. They hide digital evidence of you. Your messages aren't screenshots shared. Your accomplishments aren't celebrated publicly. Your inside jokes aren't referenced in group chats. Because sharing those things would make your connection visible, and visible connection is what they're trying to avoid. When you're together in semi-public settings, their energy changes. They're less affectionate, less engaged, more focused on whoever else is around. Like they're demonstrating to observers that you're not actually that important to them. The psychology of what's happening here, this person has values they claim and values they actually live by, and those two don't align. They might genuinely believe they care about you. The feeling part might be real, but their actions consistently demonstrate that caring for you matters less than their image. They have narrative about who they're supposed to be, and you don't fit that narrative. Maybe they think they're supposed to be with someone more impressive. Maybe they think you're beneath certain standard. Maybe they're afraid of what association with you says about them. And rather than challenge that narrative or question whether it's even valid, they're just compartmentalizing, keeping you in private where narrative doesn't have to hold up to scrutiny. They're getting benefit of relationship without cost of commitment. In private, they get intimacy and attention. In public, they get freedom from association that might complicate their image. It's best of both worlds for them and worst of both worlds for you, because you're giving full transparency while receiving only partial investment. The shame is theirs, but they're projecting it onto you. If they felt truly comfortable with you, they wouldn't be embarrassed. But rather than examining why they feel ashamed, they're managing the shame by hiding you instead of hiding their judgment. What this behavior actually communicates, I want what you offer, but I don't want to be associated with you. That's the message. That's what's being said through their actions, regardless of what their words claim. Your value to me is circumstantial. You're useful in private, but problematic in public. That's what the pattern communicates, your conditional benefit rather than consistent priority. I'm more concerned with what other people think about me than with how my actions affect you. That's what the behavior reveals about their character. You're not someone I'm proud to be connected to. That's what the embarrassment actually means. And no matter what pretty words they use to your face, their actions are telling truth that words are hiding. Why Virgo is particularly vulnerable to this dynamic? You're analytical, which means you can explain away inconsistencies. You see context and nuance and reasons why maybe it's not as bad as it looks. And while that ability to see complexity is gift, it can also make you deaf to what patterns are actually telling you. You're reliable, which means you keep showing up even when they're inconsistent. You don't make scenes or demands or ultimatums, so they never have to face consequences for treating you like backup option instead of real priority. You're private, which means you don't broadcast when you're hurt. You don't call people out publicly. You don't tell everyone how you're being treated. So they get to maintain image of being a good person while actually being someone who's ashamed of you. You doubt your own perception. You assume you're reading it wrong, being too sensitive, seeing patterns that aren't there, when actually your observation is accurate and your perception is catching something real that your doubt is then making you question. Here's what you need to actually hear. Their embarrassment says nothing about your worth. You're not lacking something that would make them comfortable being associated with you. They're lacking something: integrity, confidence, willingness to be authentic. Their shame is about their character, not about your value. The face they show you might be genuine, but it's not complete. The face they show others is also part of who they are. And the person who can be warm with you privately but cold with you publicly is someone fragmented, inconsistent, and untrustworthy. You deserve someone who's the same person with you alone as they are in public, someone who doesn't have to hide you, someone who's proud to be associated with you. And settling for someone who performs closeness while feeling distant is settling for crumbs when you're worth feast. The relationship is one directional. You're giving transparency and receiving performance. That's not balance. And relationships that aren't balanced get heavier for the person carrying more weight. How the two-faced behavior actually develops usually starts small. They mention you less frequently than you mention them. They're less inclined to introduce you. They don't bring you to group events. And you might not even notice because it starts gradual, starts with explanations that seem reasonable. Then you start noticing the gap, the warmth in private versus the distance in public becomes obvious. But by then you've already invested, already told yourself reasons why it's fine, already explained to yourself why they might be acting that way. You start adjusting your expectations downward. You tell yourself you don't need public acknowledgement. You convince yourself private connection is enough, when actually what you're doing is accepting treatment that slowly erodes your self-respect. Then you're trapped. You've normalized the inconsistency so thoroughly that you don't even see it as a problem anymore. You've just integrated it as this is how they are, when actually this is how they treat you, and you're allowing it. What their embarrassment reveals about what they actually think. They think there's something about you that's not good enough. Not good enough for public, not good enough for their friends to know about, not good enough to be proud of. And while they might not consciously frame it that way, that's what the behavior communicates. They think their image matters more than your feelings. They're prioritizing how others perceive them over how their actions affect you. And someone who consistently chooses image over kindness is not someone who actually cares about you. They think they can get away with it. They think you won't leave because you're too accommodating, too conflict avoidant, too inclined to see their perspective and make excuses. And unfortunately, they might be right, because people often do stay in situations like this longer than they should. The specific ways they're embarrassed. They're embarrassed about your appearance or style or how you present. They think other people will judge them based on how you look, which is actually their problem, not yours. But they've made it your problem by hiding you when visibility might happen. They're embarrassed about your background or your circumstances. They think other people will look down on them for being associated with someone from certain situation. And rather than defending you or challenging that judgment, they're just removing you from situations where judgment might occur. They're embarrassed about being seen as having bad taste in people. They think other people they care about won't understand what they see in you. So instead of explaining or defending choice, they're just keeping you hidden. They're embarrassed about their own behavior when with you. Maybe you make them feel emotions they don't want others to see. Maybe you bring out softness they think makes them look weak. So they suppress it in public and only allow it in private where nobody's watching. What you're experiencing as a result, you're experiencing cognitive dissonance. One version of them seems caring and present and invested. Other version seems ashamed and dismissive and distant. And your mind is working overtime trying to reconcile those two contradictory experiences. You're developing insecurity in relationship that you wouldn't have with someone operating consistently. Their inconsistency makes you question yourself, makes you wonder if you're a problem, makes you try harder to be acceptable. You're protecting them from consequences of their behavior. You're not telling anyone how they treat you. You're not calling out the inconsistency. You're just absorbing it and adjusting your own expectations downward. You're eroding your own standards. You're teaching yourself to accept treatment you know is disrespectful. And that teaching is going to affect every relationship going forward until you address it. Here's the hard truth. Someone who's embarrassed of you in public doesn't actually love you. They might care about aspects of you. They might genuinely enjoy time with you. But love that's real doesn't hide. Love that's real isn't ashamed. Love that's real wants to be visible. You're getting performance, not relationship. You're getting someone showing up as best version of themselves in private moments when they can control the narrative, and hiding whenever there's risk of that narrative being challenged. The warmth in private is real, but it's incomplete. It's them giving you just enough to keep you invested while protecting enough distance to keep you from becoming real priority. It's calculated generosity, not genuine connection. You cannot fix this by being better, by being more impressive, by working on yourself, because the problem isn't you. The problem is them being unwilling to be authentic with the people they claim to care about. What you actually deserve, someone who's equally warm in public and private, someone whose behavior doesn't change based on audience, someone whose affection for you isn't contingent on nobody else finding out. Someone who's proud to be associated with you, not in performative way, but in, I want the people I care about to know you because you matter to me way. That's baseline standard, not luxury. Someone who doesn't make you question whether they're actually invested. Someone whose actions align with their words. Someone who doesn't require you to do mental gymnastics to understand why they treat you differently depending on context. Someone who doesn't use you, who doesn't take what you offer in private and then pretend it didn't happen in public. Someone who honors what exists between you regardless of who's watching. What happens if you keep accepting this? You'll normalize it further. This becomes just how relationships work, warm in private, distant in public. And you'll find yourself doing same thing with future partners, repeating pattern of allowing people to compartmentalize their connection to you. You'll internalize their shame. You'll start believing there's something about you that's genuinely embarrassing, when really you're just accepting criticism from someone too insecure to be honest with themselves about their own issues. You'll waste time trying to become acceptable trying to change aspects of yourself to make them more comfortable being public about you, when the real issue is they're unwilling to be authentic. You'll miss opportunity for actual healthy connection. While you're invested in someone performing affection, you're unavailable for someone capable of genuine consistency. And that opportunity cost is real. Here's what you need to do. Stop accepting the split. Tell them what you've noticed, not accusatory but clear. I've noticed you treat me differently in private than in public, and I need to understand what that's about. Pay attention to how they respond. Do they get defensive? Do they deny it? Do they try to gaslight you into thinking you're imagining it? Their response will tell you everything about whether this is fixable or whether you're dealing with someone incapable of being honest. Set boundary. Tell them what you need to continue in relationship. If we're going to continue this, I need you to be consistent with me, regardless of who's watching, or whatever your version of that is. Actually enforce that boundary. If they slip back into old pattern, if they continue treating you differently in public, then you have to be willing to remove yourself, because accepting the behavior, again, just teaches them they can do it with impunity. Consider if you want to be with someone who's already shown you who they are. They've told you through their actions that your comfort matters less than their image. And that's information you need to take seriously when deciding whether this is investment worth maintaining. The reality you need to accept. This person has shown you something fundamental about their character. They're capable of performance. They're willing to hide people to protect image. And once you know someone is capable of that, you can't unknow it. Virgo, you're observant enough to have noticed this. You're smart enough to understand what it means. And if you're honest with yourself, you probably already know what you need to do. Staying teaches both of you wrong lessons. It teaches them they can treat people this way without consequence, and it teaches you that this is acceptable. And neither of those lessons serves either of you. Leaving doesn't mean you're being dramatic or unreasonable. It means you're valuing yourself enough to refuse settling for partial affection from someone too insecure to give full authenticity. And that's actually a sign of healthy self-respect. They love you to your face. Behind your back, they're embarrassed. That gap between private affection and public shame is canyon you cannot bridge. And continuing to try to bridge it is going to erode you in ways that damage how you show up in future relationships. You deserve better. Not perfect, nobody is perfect, but consistent, honest, willing to be authentically connected with you regardless of who's watching. That's not asking for moon. That's asking for baseline human decency. The pattern you're seeing is real. Your observation is accurate. And now you get to decide if you're going to accept it or if you're going to choose yourself. That choice is yours. And the way you respond to it is going to define how you get treated in every relationship that follows.